Hi everyone, welcome to Daria Strategy channel. Restaking is a very promising direction in DeFi and a hot topic in the blockchain community. So I'm happy to have Gaia and Jonas from Byzantine Finance as a guest for this interview. Byzantine.fi is a restaking aggregation layer that enables permissionless construction of any kind of structured restaking product. From this video, you'll learn from Gaia and Jonas about the future of DeFi, building startup in a stealth mode, and being a female founder in the male field. Gaia and Jonas, I'm happy that you joined me for this conversation. Let's start with your short bios and why you're working on restaking the aggregation layer.
Hi Daria, thanks a lot for the invite. I'm very happy to be here and to explain a little bit more about Byzantine and what we do and how we ended up in restaking. To give a short background about me, I'm originally Italian, moved to Paris to study statistics and economics in Sorbonne University. Eventually dropped out my second year to work full-time in venture capital. Decided eventually that actually I wanted to go back and get my diploma. I graduated with statistical analysis of crypto prices. I was already investing at the time. I got in a lot with the NFT wave between 2020 and 2021 and just kept investing after and kept researching the Ethereum space. I did a specialization in finance, and this is where I met Jonas for the first time, and then proceeded with the master double degree with École Polytechnique and HEC, and this is where I met again Jonas, and we seated down together in October of last year, and we knew that we wanted to build something, and we wanted to build something together, and we started basically reading a lot of papers and forming opinions and what was going on in the Ethereum ecosystem especially. And we came across EigenLayer white paper. And this is a little bit on how it started and how we got into restaking.
And for me, I first got into crypto in 2017. That's some time ago at this point. I think it's a classic story that a lot of people tell. A friend of mine chilled a bunch of meme coins, told me, altcoins at the time, told me, get into these, they're going to 10x overnight. And so I started reading a bunch of Reddit boards and going into it with no experience and still an incredible degen attitude. Ended up 5xing my portfolio in a month. And then January 2018 got completely wiped out. And I think that is what truly hooked me, trying to understand what just happened, why that happened, started reading more white papers and joining the community, and became a bit more of a value investor, I suppose, and followed crypto on the side for some time. During my undergrad in London, then launched my first venture in something completely different. It was a communications platform, which was really fun, and then came to Paris, actually also for academic reasons, as part of my master's, and re-met Gaia here. And I just spent a year working in venture capital, met Gaia, wanted to do something new. We were both really interested in Web3, and then we came across the EigenLayer white paper. And restaking is just something that right from the start fascinated both of us. My background is in economics, so to me it represented such a systemic innovation, an advantage for the AVSs and the protocols and the chains and the stakers. And it's just something that gets me excited to think about. It's an exciting space to build in. And yeah, we haven't looked back since.
My next question is, what is Byzantine.fi? And what's the purpose, what's the mission, and why restaking?
As you mentioned before, Byzantine is basically the first restaking aggregation and abstraction layer. And what we've seen in the situation is that restaking can be very technically complicated. And is becoming more and more fragmented across multiple chains, across multiple restaking protocols. And building on top of it is hard, but the opportunity is absolutely great. And this is where we position ourselves. We basically allow permissionless deployment of native omni-chain restaking strategies. We optimize for slashing risks. We enable institutions and retail investment in basically a risk control environment. We build on top of all the different restaking protocols and allow very easy access to all of them.
And the way that we came to this conclusion is that towards the end of last year, we spoke to a ton of different organizations in the Web3 space. Custodians, exchanges, funds, operators, about how they view restaking and how they view the future of it and their involvement in it. And we kind of combined that with their own experience in statistics, finance, economics. And the key conclusion that we came to was that the risk perspective for restaking at the time and still now just isn't tenable for a lot of more sophisticated investors and larger organizations like funds or like institutions. And the reason for that is that you can't really pick individual AVSs, you can't pick individual operators, you can't put together your own portfolio. Right now, we are expecting hedge funds to on-chain hedge funds to effectively invest in these ETFs, pre-built portfolios only. And that's the original mission behind behind Byzantine, to, from a technical perspective, make it possible to invest in and deploy custom restaking strategies. That's what we've been working on since then.
Why did you decide to focus on restaking? Why this DeFi direction attracts so much attention?
We started working on restaking and doing a lot of research again around October. I was with Jonas in the mountains in France, and we were reading a lot of white papers. We came across EigenLayer white paper, and took us quite a few reads before fully understanding what they were doing. But basically, we came across one of the major innovation on Ethereum and potentially also cross-chain. And our vision is that restaking, it's really not just an investment opportunity or a new financial primitive at all. And restaking is basically the path to open innovation in Ethereum and on other chains. And this might seem very buzzwordy, but what that means is that basically they found a way of solving the cold start problem encountered by new chains or other actively validator systems, that basically anything that requires consensus. And we strongly believe that restaking represents a sustainable, systematic innovation.
I think Gaia summarized it really nicely. What got me personally excited about it is exactly this systemic element to it, that right now in the market, it's just seen as an interesting new investment opportunity, but really in a year, in 2 years, it'll be the basis of the security layer of so many different decentralized systems. And the reason why there's, of course, on the one hand, the reason why we're working on Byzantine, the company, but the reason why I get up every morning is because it feels like we're in restaking at a stage where we truly get to co-design what the industry looks like. And that's unbelievably exciting.
What is the target audience for your product?
That is a great question, and we basically are focusing a lot on B2B. What we do is basically white label infrastructure, and we have two very different kind of clients. On one hand, we have, for example, funds and some kind of liquidity providers. And with them, we basically work through our DApp. And on the other hand, we work with the client that we call integrators. What those clients are basically wallets, custodians, exchanges, etc. Whoever needs to offer restaking to their end clients, and they want to own the decision of the yield and the risk that they want to take. So basically what we allow them to do is to build their own restaking offering through our infrastructure and basically diversify, risk adjust, and yield adjust based on their client profiles and the risk profile.
As far as I know, you use Ethereum EigenLayer, and you mentioned that you use EigenLayer as a basis for restaking. Do you plan to use new restaking protocols in the future, add more protocols to your scope?
100%. I mean, we plan to go on mainnet around early next year with three base protocols, specifically EigenLayer, Symbiotic, and Babylon, which enables the restaking of Bitcoin. What's really important to us is from the start have first of all, no single point of failure, and second of all, be cross-chain. One of the big visions that we have right now for the medium term is that the first ever cross-chain restaking vault, which will definitely exist in a few months, will be based on our infrastructure. So yeah, we're building to make it happen.
Okay, so how do you see the future of DeFi? What kind of products or services will be in demand?
What I see on one hand, it's a more structured kind of DeFi. What I mean with this is that we've been seeing a lot of like ETFs getting approved, Bitcoin at the beginning, Ethereum now. And what I expect is that a lot of the TradFi kind of wealth managers, asset managers, potentially other financial institutions from TradFi will eventually come into the DeFi space. So I would expect more kind of institutionalization of the services of DeFi towards trial of onboarding of this like DeFi that is being like looking at this world from far, but that is getting nearer and nearer over time. So I'd expect in the next 2 to 3 years to have more and more involvement of TradFi.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're really going to see a professionalization of this space over time. The bubbles, the ups and downs will become smaller and smaller. I mean, we can cite the work of Gaia, our resident crypto statistics academic here, in how volatility of crypto assets is something that goes down over time. And to me, the qualitative factors behind that are really an increasing involvement of TradFi institutions and more kind of outreach to non-crypto spaces. Something that I see as a huge part of the Web3 space, perhaps not the DeFi space, is this idea of products and services that are backed by Web3 without the end user actually knowing about it. Whether that's things like apps for money sending or whether that's things like gaming. Um, and all of those services will be built on and backed by a lot of the infrastructure that exists right now. And that's kind of what I mean by professionalization. This core little DeFi bubble that we live in will become more and more solidified because we're going to see inflows both from TradFi and from other kinds of decentralized systems.
Do you think that your friends or relatives can use DeFi instruments, for example, in the nearest future?
Great question. I think that we're moving towards that. Some of my friends do use some DeFi products. And I think that there's a lot of the industry right now and a lot of the chat that I've had at ETHCC are really around how do we make it super easy for everyone to access DeFi. And I think we're moving pretty fast toward that direction. But maybe something that I think it's important to keep in mind is that abstraction is great and of course helps a lot B2C and clients to get onboarded. But it also means basically taking away quite some flexibility. So it can be challenging, and I think what this industry needs to remember is that, yeah, we can abstract away a lot of the decision making, but we have to remind ourselves to keep this flexibility that makes this industry so great.
As Gaia mentioned, a lot of her friends, a lot of my friends as well, kind of people of a similar background and age and all that, yeah, a lot of crypto engagement. But if you ask me, will my grandma ever have a wallet? The answer is a hard no. Will my dad might experiment with it. I don't think my mom would. But my point is more that to give the vast majority of the human population access to Web3, people that don't have the time to engage with it with the depth that we have, that needs to happen through paths and institutions that they trust. which can either be through the abstraction element, but otherwise through these TradFi institutions. I mean, if some of those institutions through which, I mean, my grandma and my parents, hold some of their money, if they were to add certain crypto elements to their portfolio, that would give the entire investment a different kind of legitimacy in the eyes of that. At the end of the day, it's, to me, not really a question of technology and much more a question of distribution and marketing, as much as we hate to say it. And for that, yeah, those kinds of traditional legitimate paths are just essential, are the way to it.
Can you please explain why are you building in a stealth mode?
Basically, building in stealth mode means that you're keeping it low and you're trying not to share. You try to share the minimum amount of information possible with the outside world about like what you're building. You basically hide the brand, and it's something that I discovered while my time in venture capital, because a lot of like great part of the startups that I was discussing with were all in stealth mode, and I feel like a lot of the great startups are the ones that don't just like come out directly into the market. On our end, what we decided, and the reason why we decided to stay in stealth, is because we strongly believe that, especially in this industry, signaling is extremely important. So when you go openly into the market, what you need to do is a lot of noise. And of course, when you start at the beginning, there's so many things that you're still figuring out, that you're still building, partnership that needs to be created, and you cannot go directly out in the world and make a lot of noise since the beginning. So what we build is really this. What we want to build is conviction around Byzantine and FOMO and like this incremental enlargement of the company, and this needs to be created at the beginning. And the reason why we haven't shared like our current partnership, our current clients, our current TVL, it's because we want to accumulate it all and like explode into the market as soon as we want to grow bigger. And for the moment, it's about finishing the product development, aligning all the partnership, and closing our fundraising.
What type of cooperation with funds or private investors, angel investors, is perfect for you?
So basically what I've been concentrating on over the past few weeks, it's onboarding rock stars. What I mean with that, it's basically CEOs or CTOs from other protocols in the ecosystem. It could be restaking, but also like widely known protocols. And what I'm looking there is experience. I love to exchange with those founders and learn more from them, and having them engaged also financially in a protocol. It's of course a good boost. On one hand, too, of course, then like having access to even better investors, but also in terms of where should Byzantine go and how could we handle things in the best way possible. I think that relying on someone else's experience is absolutely key. So on one hand, I look for experience for the business angels and from protocols that managed to explode into the market, and really learning from what they did in a very granular way. Also like going down and be like, okay, how did you onboard those people? How did you handle the interview processes and like all the HR? Because like it's key in early stage startups. On the other hand, for VCs, what we look for is, of course, one hand, it's branding, because again, signaling in this industry extremely important. On the other hand, someone that is less about experience that is covered by business angels, but still someone that can have an overview and have ideas around what they're investing in and why and where this industry is going. Because VCs, of course, have the benefit of having this macro view and having basically constant access to all the deal flow. This means that they have a constant eye on what is going on in the industry and are able to report a bit on the trends and maybe having more of a macro view. Well, like I rely more on Business Angel for like the micro one, and like how do you actually handle like some day-to-day tasks, some like very basic and things. I rely on VCs more for the macro perspective.
Yeah, very much agreed. The only thing I would add to this is from my operational perspective, I really like working with funds that have a lot of related useful portfolio companies because it's just a much faster way in, a much faster way of doing outreach than the traditional way.
Are there any differences between pitching of traditional startup and DeFi startup?
Yeah, so we previously built an aerospace company together, and so yeah, we got to pitch quite a bit. And of course, there was like a lot of R&D, and the industry is pretty different in the sense that it's all 65 years old dudes that know each other since high school, but it's very much more based on the technicalities, I'd say, and really the market, how you're going through it, and like what's the market size, what's the TAM, and it's more academic almost. While I feel like in Web3 overall, when you go pitching to a fund, you have to build more conviction around what you're doing, and like selling the long-term vision of what you're building.
For me, with some colleagues a few years ago, we set up a B2C fintech, and there's some similarities and some differences. The way that fintechs are set up is that unlike a lot of other organizations, it's very challenging to just, put something out there and test it because there's such a large technical security and in traditional finance also regulatory burden to it. So that's something that's kind of similar to what we're building now, that you really have to get the security mechanisms right before you can launch this MVP, this version 0.1 to market. The biggest difference is how challenging it is to pitch to non-DeFi funds and investors DeFi needs. Right now, crypto is still such a bubble, such an enclosed ecosystem. And I mean, even for me years ago when I first dove into it, it took me a few months until I truly understand how people in this industry think. And the traditional Web2 VC funds often don't understand that. So it's very challenging to pitch crypto companies to them. And then on top of that, we're in restaking. So we're doing something that even for the Web3 space is incredibly technical. So speaking with someone that doesn't have that base layer understanding of how things work, how mechanisms work, that's the biggest challenge. Yeah, and I learned this at the beginning. We pitched to a ton of different, or we spoke to a ton of different DeFi funds and Web2 funds. And the Web2 fund conversations, there was very little point to it. I mean, they didn't really offer, the primary purpose of this was just to gather feedback and kind of market sentiment around restaking and Web3. And we didn't get very much useful feedback from them. And it really informs how we're going to run the fundraising round of the coming months.
Yeah, I agree with you. And actually, I had some conversations with the startup incubators, accelerators, but they focused on more traditional niches. Yeah. And they are like, oh, we're interested in Web3, but we don't know we don't know what to expect, and we don't know how many questions do we have. So like, but I think it's normal for such a fast growing industry, and soon they'll have this experience. It's funny, and thanks for highlighting this. Yeah, because it's really important.
You've actually touched on something really, really interesting. I think one of the biggest struggles for Web2 funds to get into Web3 is that they don't know what questions to ask. They don't really know what is important. Because any Web3 company, even at the very early stage, a protocol, for example, is so much more scalable and could scale so much faster with infinitely smaller marginal cost of acquiring new users or new TVL, that the priorities at the start are often very, very different to a Web2 company, even a Web2 fintech. Um, and I imagine it's challenging to wrap one's head around if there's no experience.
You built in stealth mode here that you're just discussing with funds, but maybe you did some expenses that helped you to be more visible or be more understandable for investors, for potential users.
So, as Gaia mentioned, to kickstart our round, we collected quite a bit of angel investment so far already. We're still expanding that a bit before we launch into the main chunk of the round. But what we're using it on so far is salaries of the technical team, unequivocally. That's really the one major expense that we have. After the round, we've budgeted quite some expenses for marketing and brand building, because especially in the B2B space, that's something that's incredibly important. But I don't think that there'll ever be a time where the tech people specifically, won't be our biggest expense.
For the project spends more on marketing than on tech.
It would be questionable.
And we know some cases, the recent cases.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what is more vital in Web3? Having money or having broad network?
So I literally had this conversation yesterday evening at dinner, and my answer is definitely network. Because the reason why so many projects like fundraise so much, it's because they have connections. And the second reason why is because they need to build more connections. So actually, I feel like the money and the fundraisings just help you building a better and stronger and bigger network. But if you already have the network, then it's not a problem fundraising. So I think the network is the most important thing, also because aside from like fundraising at all, also for development of the protocol, and like it's like onboarding new developers, you need to have a broad network. For sales, you need a broad network. For like being known in the ecosystem, it's all about like being very present. So for me, it's definitely the network.
100% agree with this answer. I mean, money can buy you recognition and over time help you in setting up a network and building that slowly. But having a good network will definitely get you access to good people, good clients, good partners, and also good investors and angels. So definitely network wins.
How to develop your professional network? Do you have any tips, tricks for beginners?
Great question. I'd say participate to all the events that like.
I was about to say, yeah.
There's so many in the Web3. Like the community is really growing and is great. So I'd say participate to a lot of events, because there you can actually build connection right away. Participate to hackathons. We did quite some hackathons, and it's a great way of like meeting people. This is how we met good chunk of our tech team, and I still think is like the most valuable and the best way to start working with someone, because you get basically 36 hours where you work together, so you get to test like the skills, you get to test the fit. So no, it's I'd say participation in events. And then of course it's like being active in Discord channels and being active on Twitter, and also reaching out to the people and just asking questions and exchanging a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think reaching out to people and all of that, trying to make I mean, actively trying to make contacts, that's not going to surprise anyone. I would say that the single biggest piece of advice is in person as much as you can. Events, conferences, hackathons, show up, talk to everyone. this is not just how you get your name known, but this is also how you might get access to kind of second degree connections. Once you meet someone and you tell them what you're doing and they say what they're doing, you can be like, oh, that reminds me, I know this other person. And then they'll say, oh, and I know this other person. So network can quickly start to scale exponentially. But to me, that's incredibly hard to do just over a call or just over a chat, in person all the way.
I agree with you, totally agree. And actually, we met at Ethereum-CC,
Exactly.
yeah, and it was super cool place to meet more people from the Ethereum ecosystem. Gaia, this is a question to you. What is it like to be a woman in blockchain and crypto and such solid tech and difficult space? Have you ever felt any prejudice or superior attitude from men, or any kind of I don't know, snobbery because you're a woman?
That's a tricky, hard question to answer every time. Yeah, yes and no. Yes and no. On one hand, you get more visibility. On the other, it can be harder. So starting from the more visibility, of course, there are not a lot of girls in Web3. That gives you right away a lot of visibility, just because when you enter a room, usually it's just like filled up with guys. So of course you get more attentions. You get more attentions in conferences, in networking events, and this could be good because of course I'm there for Byzantine and I represent Byzantine, and this means that if I get more attention, Byzantine gets more attention. Yeah, no, overall I think that it can be challenging because sometimes you're just not taken super seriously, and I think it is like, for me, are two things. On one hand, because I look very young, and like they don't expect me to be one of the founders of the protocol. And the second one is because I am not super tall, and that means that my presence in the room is small as well. And I feel like being tall really helps a lot in networking events. But yeah, Jonas can tell. But it's a mix of both. It's overall, I didn't have a strong take on it. I'd love to see more girls in the industry, that is for sure. But I also think that is a very inclusive industry. So apart from like a few cases of people that did not take me seriously or like were kind of like looking down, my overall experience is pretty great.
Daria, as Gaia mentioned a second ago, her and I were in aerospace before. How does crypto compare to aerospace? In terms of the attitudes towards women, I've actually never asked you that.
Very hard question. I think that it's okay. If I have to think about it, I think that Web3 is better. Because aerospace, it's very institutional, it's very traditional, and again, it's just guys, but it's also just guys that knew each other since a very long time, and they grew up together. They have, I don't know, but yeah, Web3 is so much better in that terms.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience. I'm agree with you that being a woman and being a woman founder attracts more attention. Yeah, and it's pretty cool. But yeah, but sometimes it can be challenging. Let's talk about the Web3 culture in general. Jonas, do you think that Web3 culture needs some improvement?
So interestingly, at this EthCC, I really enjoyed the overall attitude, the overall culture, in comparison to previous events I've attended. I feel like this is less so the case now, but previously, crypto really used to almost embrace the fact that it's this little bubble disconnected from reality. And we had a lot of meme coins and altcoins, and I mean, it was really very little other than degen culture. And degen culture is still alive and well, and it's a wonderful thing to have because, of course, in many ways, it's the early adopter audience for crypto project. Still represents a huge share of the market cap of crypto. But gradually, more and more, it's developing into what I would consider kind of a serious industry, as harsh as that sounds. And I think that that's an unequivocally positive element, because to me, that development is necessary for crypto to truly become legitimate outside of this wonderful bubble in which we sit. So I think crypto culture is very much moving in the right direction. And paradoxically, I actually think that some of the big crypto scandals and crashes of the past few years have been a very positive thing. Because, we went hard and fast is good, but sometimes you go in the wrong direction, and then you have very aggressive corrections. But these aggressive corrections, I mean, once a kid touches a hot stove, it's never going to touch it again, right? So we were playing around, and it was great fun to play around, and we're still very much playing around, but we're playing around with more purpose now and with a bit more awareness and knowledge. And so I really like where crypto culture is going.
What do you read? What do you listen to? Or maybe what do you play to relax?
So I think I have two. The first one is a podcast. I really enjoy listening to podcasts, and it's a podcast that is called Epicenter. And one we know pretty well. One of the hosts is Felix Lutz. It's now very much involved in Symbiotic. And what I like about this podcast is that this is a little bit of how I started, like to understand better everything Web3, what was going on, some having some feedbacks on different protocols, having some feedbacks on technology, and like better understanding how they were working. And I think it's like a great podcast for beginners to intermediate, I'd say. And the second thing that I'd love to recommend, it's actually it's a series on Netflix, and it's called Super Pumped, and it's the story of Uber. And what I like it is two things. What I like about it is two things. The first one, what I like about it are the following two things. The first one is that really tells you really teaches you how to have a vision and be bullish about it, and just keep going no matter what. And the second thing is that he hugely fucked up on the culture of the company he was building. And I think that teaches a lot on inclusion, on diversity inside the companies, but also on how to build and how important is having a great culture that keep the company together, basically, because at the end it's about people, and it's about having a great time, and about building and outperforming, but living in a healthy environment, because it's where you spend great chunk of your day. So
You made me watch Super Pumped, and I can only recommend it. It's such a fun show. It's genuinely, you get very useful learnings out of it, but it's also incredibly entertaining. Um, while Gaia was answering, I was thinking a bit about what I do for relaxation, and two things come to mind. Neither of them are very crypto related, I'm afraid. Um, I really enjoy just going for walks through Paris, which is such a cliche answer, but I mean, I love it here because it's such a romanticizable city. I mean, whether you're having a bad day or a good day, the second you're outside and you cross the bridge and the city is just stunning as it has been for 150 years, you feel great. Um, and the second thing is, this is something that can be done at home. I really enjoy playing grand strategy games. I think your viewers might be just about nerdy enough to know Paradox Interactive. It's a game company, and they specifically have a game called Victoria 3, which is effectively a huge economic simulator. It's worldwide. It represents the world map. You could pick any country, and then over 100 years, its economy is modeled, and you can make different decisions. It's incredibly fun. Gaia has watched me play it a few times, and she finds it unbelievably boring. And I admit it's an acquired taste. But, if you stare at this map for 3 hours and you make all the right decisions, then perhaps at the end, you're able to change your tax policy to be slightly more progressive. And I think it could be, it sounds very nerdy, but it can be very cathartic.
Gaia, Jonas, thank you very much for your experience, for sharing your thoughts, for explaining how Byzantine works. So I'm sure that this will be very helpful and interesting to everyone who will watch this interview and this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was great.
Just one final note, maybe. I don't know if you know Gauntlet. Gauntlet is a really interesting on-chain research institute. And a few weeks ago, they published this study to basically prove mathematically that the people that like and share this video are the sexiest people alive. So you definitely should.